Good morning. Today I'd like to start by acknowledging that tomorrow is Memorial Day. And I'd like us to just take a moment for remembrance and honoring those who sacrificed their lives to sustain life. Let's just take a moment to send out a blessing. So today we're going to be continuing the series on prosperity, working with chapters 3 and 4. And when Reverend Sheila asked for a title, I had no idea. So what I did was I just sort of thumbed through the chapters, the two chapters, and what just popped out of the page was the words rest assured. Now, the funny thing was that when I went back to look for it, I couldn't find it at all. And so I decided to look it up. And I went to find that there was only one reference to rest assured, which was actually one translation of what are commonly phrased that we know of, which is peace be with you. But the words rest assured, I don't know, this just has a visceral effect on me. It just makes me feel like I can relax, like as if those words are saying everything's going to be okay. And I think it's kind of important to be talked about during this time, especially when it seems like maybe quite the contrary is happening. So rest assured, a path to abundance. Like, well, how do those two go together? So that's what we're going to be talking about. And as we know that the world has shifted dramatically in these last 2 months, I mean, all over the world. And I think when the world took a pause, something shifted. And for those who think that they just want to just get back to how things were the way they were, it's not a fit anymore. And whether, COVID's been really a mixed bag. There's been a lot of death and a lot of loss. And also for some, it's been a respite. It's been a time for them to connect with their families. It's been this time of spaciousness and this time of looking at what's really important. And there's been a lot of concern, like, where is this going? I know personally, for many of you know that I practice acupuncture in the state of California. I'm considered an essential worker. And so it's been the world of gloves and masks and sterilizing everything. I mean, my place glows in the dark as far as that. And with this time, I think we're at a choice point, both collectively and individually. Reverend Deb Johnson recently gave a talk that I loved, and the title is called Don't Waste a Crisis. The word for crisis in Chinese means danger and opportunity. Now, the danger is obvious with all the loss of life and the loss of income. But the opportunity may not be so obvious. And I'm sure that we're going to be seeing in the months and years to come what those opportunities have emerged as a result of this time. She said that Rev Deb said we're at a time of a soul crisis where what we're really needing to understand is the truth of our being. And we're here at this time to experience fundamental truths, not just to know about them. And she says it's time to realize that what we are seeking is found within. And that if we don't find those core truths to live from, we're actually going to externalize it. We're actually going to look for love in all the wrong places. We're going to be searching for, actually, we're going to be reacting versus responding to what is trying to emerge. So she said, let's not lose this opportunity to just go back to the way things were before. It reminds me of a quote by Nelson Mandela that said, I never lose. Either I win, I learn. So what are we to learn at this time? What if we were to learn about how to live from being deeply inspired versus deeply polarized? What if we were to actually open ourselves to the infusion of spirit? What if we were to be given ways to have access to the answers within of how to live from the deepest core of our being? These are just a few things I want to explore today. It's a tall order in a very short time. So the title of chapter 3 in Charles Fillmore's book on prosperity is Faith in Invisible Substance, the Key to Demonstration. So as I looked through these chapters, and these two chapters, and there were many principles, to really good ones to work with, I actually decided to go with just one. And it's a quote from Charles Fillmore that was one of his absolute favorites. And for me personally, was one of the hardest to understand. So I decided to challenge myself and explore it. And it's from Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Now faith is the assurance for things hoped for the things. Let me say that again. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. So what we're going to do is we're going to be taking the verse and we're going to be taking it apart from translations from different Bible interpretations that may actually just exchange one word for another. So faith is the assurance of things hoped for. So what is faith really? I've heard faith is finding answers in the heart, but this word has always been elusive to me. Jesus said faith is the new condition for the upliftment of the human race. We must have faith to move from a developmental evolution to a quantum leap in our evolution, because frankly, we don't have the time. And it's interesting when talking about faith that Jesus demanded faith from those he's healed. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 29, it says, according to your faith be it done unto you. There's a story about the early days in the Unity movement where making weekly payroll was an adventure in faith. So Charles and Myrtle gathered workers together to pray about the situation to see if they could actually find a way to meet payroll that week. And one of the members said, let's pray that the money holds out. And Myrtle quietly said, oh no, let's pray that our faith holds out. Now the God's Word Translation Bible talks about this scripture, Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the assurance of things we expect and the conviction of the existence of things we cannot see. faith is more than just belief. Charles Fillmore says that faith is a magnetic power that draws to us whatever we hold in conviction. So I was speaking to an MD the other day, and he was talking about his studies with a biogravitational physicist when he lived in Colorado. And this physicist was saying that in new physics, their interest isn't so much about matter anymore, but it's really about the field in which the matter exists and the effect that that field has on matter. And they were also interested on how matter comes into existence as a result of that field. He said everything self-organizes itself in this biogravitational field. He says it's the magnetic field that gives direction or vectors to the passive electric field. It's interesting because Charles Fillmore would say that thoughts are electric and feelings are magnetic. And it's the thoughts and feelings combined that create the manifestation. So in neuroscience, what they're doing is they are measuring the effect of our random thoughts versus when we hold something with conviction, with expectation, with will, that what it does, it actually impacts the field. And this doctor also spoke about virtual particles. These are particles that can't be seen, but they can be felt. And he said, think of virtual particles being like a swing. You know, a swing kind of going back and forth. And he said that virtual particles also have that quality of being like a wave that moves back and forth. And what they are affected by is the magnetic field or the magnetic disturbance in the field. Reminds me of Star Wars. Luke, there's a disturbance in the field. Something can be felt. And he said this disturbance of the field, such as they're measuring by intense anger or fear or love or appreciation or joy. He said this movement occurs faster than the speed of light. Can you imagine? And it's interesting, it's this movement in the field by the virtual particles that actually enable particles and matter to be formed. Be it done unto you according to your expectation. Of course, that's what they're finding in quantum physics right now, that what we expect to turn out is that whole notion, is it a wave or a particle? Well, it becomes whatever we expect it to be. So that's what science is exploring today. But almost 100 years ago, Charles Fillmore was saying this: faith is the perceiving power of mind linked with the power to shape substance. Let's take that apart. So in the book, The Revealing Word, it says substance is a living energy. It's a divine idea out of which everything is made. It enriches and sustains any idea that is projected into it. It's, to me, like fertile soil. I'm getting ready right now to plant a garden. And of course, before I can do that, I've got to dig out the weeds, take out the old roots, and make space so that I can plant. And Charles Fillmore says that to access substance, we actually have to clear certain things out of the way. And so I want to talk first just about, before we talk about how to plant, we're going to talk about what this rich soil of substance really is. And he said, in order to understand how substance is the key to manifestation, this rich, fertile ground, he said, first consider that God is principle, that God is substance, but God is principle. And he said, spirit is not something apart from matter, it infuses itself in matter. So he said, here's some steps to do. First, just come apart a while. Take time in the silence and enter into the stillness where we can then access another domain. And he says, as we enter into the stillness, realize that your resource is spirit. And that this all fullness, this all sustaining of the universes, sustains you. Make contact and feel it welling up inside you and dwell in and as the mind of God, as your consciousness. And as we get even a little stiller, we can feel that expansion. And we can find ourselves abiding in that. He says, you are this living entity. This is what shapes matter. He said, be open and receptive to these divine ideas that are pouring through if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear and the courage to act on those divine ideas. So when we perceive from a power that is greater than what we can know, what we're doing is we're planting potent seeds in this fertile soil of substance. What does Jesus say? It is not I that does the work, but the Father within that does this work. It is the greater living reality that wishes to live, move, and have being in and through us that does the work. This is what is called entering the causal plane, what Ernest Holmes calls first cause. And again, so much greater than what we can perceive in this world of reality, this world that we're always just reacting to instead of responding from a greater reality. In the King James 2000 Bible, Hebrews 1:11 is, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So what is this word substance? Well, we know faith is magnetic, but substance is this life potency that grows the seeds. We don't yet see them, so it's talking about evidence of things not seen. We know that when we plant, say, that apple seed, that apples, not oranges, are going to grow. We have faith in the unseen in what has been planted. And Jesus said that the substance, this fertile ground, is the treasure field from which all our needs are met. So how do we cultivate the seeds for this fertile field? Recently I met with a gardener who said that certain plants have to grow together, and certain bugs that'll be attracted, like sunflowers attract bees, in order to actually have the ecosystem be the most friendly, and so these plants will thrive. So there's a science of putting certain plants together to bring about a healthy ecosystem. What's the same with us? Dr. Rick Hansen, who you've heard me speak about, he wrote just two books that I can think of offhand, which is Neuroscience, the it's actually called the Neuroscience of Lasting Happiness, and the book Resilience, just to name a few that has written. He says that when we change our mind, we change our brain. And he said, unfortunately, though, our brains have a negativity bias. It's sort of that we're hardwired for survival. And so instinctually, ever notice how much it's easier to remember something bad that's happened than something good that's happened? It's like that old saying that he's known for, which is neurons that are wired together fire together. So when we have a trigger, it's often easier to go back into those negative biases and light up the amygdala of the brain, that part of the reptilian brain that goes, warning, warning. And when we start thinking negatively, what happens is that we tend to go down a slippery slope. It's like a child that is hanging out with the wrong crowd. Well, we know that that child's going to start attracting experiences and people that will not be for their highest good. So, do you ever notice that if you don't tend to the garden, how quickly the weeds come up? So, and also, if we notice when we try to fill our mind with the light of consciousness and good and affirming and seeing the highest and the best, do you ever notice that when we shine the light, that those shadows show up as well? He says when it feels like we're going backward, like, why is this all coming up? Is in unity, we would call that chemicalization. What it's that it's up to be seen and met so that it can be healed and released. And he says, when those negative feelings start to show up, even as the result of trying to move to something more positive, he said, we need to feel our feelings. We don't need to feed them. We don't need to chase after them. We don't need to marinate in them or set up camp with it. But we have to have the courage to open our hearts to actually explore what's there. He says you can't heal what you can't feel or you refuse to feel. He says even if it doesn't feel good, include it like a blanket that is sort of carrying or meeting it and not resisting it. He says bring those fears and doubts and concerns and give that, I would say, bring it to the altar so that we can then have access to a greater understanding and compassion. Bring it to this invisible presence that pervades everything. But fortunately, our brains are neuroplastic and that they can be shaped by the input that we give it. So what's his recommendation to turn this around so that we can actually plant seeds that we want versus what we don't want? He said, take in the good. And the word for good in German is God. So when we take in the good, we take in more of the awareness of God. And he said, savor moments. I just love that word, savor. He said, even if it's going back into your past to remember moments of care, acts of kindness, or even imagine or even seen, if we've witnessed moments of really being met and honored, the brain doesn't know the difference. So he says, do this for 5 to 20 seconds, just 5 to 20 seconds. He says it has a very deep impact on creating those grooves in our neurons. And it creates more of a likelihood that the more we take those moments to savor, that it actually, like we said before, neurons that fire together, or neurons that are wired together, fire together. And so there's then more of a propensity to go to the good rather than the not so good. And what this does is it actually activates hormones that are known for longevity in our body, and it brings more blood flow to those neurons and places. Take in the good, God. He calls this resting in the refuge so that we can feel nourished, so that we can be calm, so we can then take appropriate action to tend and befriend ourselves and others. Charles Fillmore says, bless everything if we were to increase it. Bless what you already have. You know, there's something or someone in your life that you could bless right now. Know that that place of expansion is actually fertile soil. It's rich soil. It's like fertilizer for the plants and the seeds, that appreciation for those seeds to grow. So look around right now in your environment also. What can you appreciate in this moment? Who can you appreciate? Who can you bless? And the more we look through the lens of expansion, the more things show up to fill that space. Reverend Deb gave an exercise. She said, every time you go through a doorway, pause and you whisper, entering heaven, this state of expanded consciousness. And then fill that room with light. In the International Standard Version Bible, for Hebrews 11:1, it says, now faith is the assurance that what we hope for will come about, and the certainty that what we cannot see exists. Revealing word, spiritual assurance is that it gives us the power to do the seemingly impossible, because we're fueled by that assurance. We're given a certainty that that which we cannot see still exists, and in some ways more real than this reality. There is a reality that cannot be met by our 5 senses. But when we go into the stillness and the silence, we actually begin to cultivate those inner senses. And I would also say that 6th sense of inner knowing. I got an email the other day from Notes from the Universe, and I thought it was very timely to this talk. And it said, you're not supposed to be able to see with your eyes first. That wouldn't be called manifesting if you could. You're supposed to see it with your mind first. That's what it's there for, sort of. In the Aramaic Bible in plain English, Hebrews 11:1 translation is, "Now faith is the conviction concerning those things that are in hope, as if these things are in action already, and the revelation of those things are unseen." Hope creates momentum. So I love the acronym of HOPE, HOPE, which is heart open to possibilities emerging. And I would say especially emerging in conviction, which activates those virtual particles. So this past week, I was on a call on Zoom with Adashanti, and he was talking about an essay he had written recently entitled Purpose. And he said, human beings are really unhappy when they lack a sense of direction. And what they need is a hierarchy of values and to orient their life around. And he says these values actually are a portal in which to live out our essential nature. You know, when he talked about values, think about what are considered old-fashioned values of respect and honor and kindness and compassion and collaboration. And his question was, what is worthy of orienting my entire life around? So the values that he's been working with are love and truth. So I've decided to sort of just take that on. And he said these two values, he said, I might just start working with them originally for just 24 hours. And he said, how could I take those values and perceive through them and take it into my very next interaction, into the very next quality of something that may seem very mundane? Or how could I take that truth and love into what may be a challenging situation? And he said for him, when he felt he wasn't living up into those values, he said, okay, it brought up humility. You know, I would say we're green and growing. And he said, I would just stop and pause. And I might look back of, well, how might I have lived more into that value? And he would have compassion for himself. And he would once again bring that life force, that living entity, that fertile soil of actually love and truth. And how could he use that to express his deeper nature, even while he was doing the dishes? So he said, I let the deeper parts of me do the mundane work. So what if we were to allow ourselves to be orchestrated by these deeper values, as if they were access for the divine to work through us, through them, as a guide? You know, we may not know why we may feel compelled to do certain things, to reach out, to call someone, to turn down a certain street, to open a book. And yet, the more we allow those seeds, those values to be planted in our being, the more we're actually going to be receptive, magnetized to actually seeing opportunities to express that. And as we see, as we hear, as we listen from those deeper values and from what would divine intelligence have me do? As they say in A Course in Miracles, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say, and to whom? Faith is the perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance. If we were to perceive through those values and plant in this fertile soil of this living magnetic substance and pay more attention to the divine impulses that are wanting to move through us, I think we'd be much less pulled by the outer impulses, which we didn't even originate, but were reacting to. And is it just possible that that which is eternal, unchanging, formless, actually wants to infuse consciousness in form into our awareness? And what a better time than right now, when we need a quantum leap in our evolution. What if we were to see God working in and through all? Through that child, through that co-worker, through even the soldier. Aja says, collectively, what if we were to ask, what values can we agree are worth orienting our society around? You know, the answers depend on the questions we ask. So, what is worth cultivating? What is worth planting? What is worth growing at this time? What will inform our next activity? Will it be fear or love? Are we willing to take in more good, more God, and respond from there? What kind of information are you taking in to be shaped by? The invitation is to attune to this greater reality, to actually plant our consciousness, or to allow the seeds of our consciousness to be in this rich soil of the infinite. You know, funny, Reverend Deb asked, in your vision for expressing the highest possibility, how would you act? How clean would your house be? Oops, she hasn't looked at my garage. Become the vision that you wish to bring forth. Value it. If you want peace, collaborate with Spirit ways to be more peaceful first with yourself, others in this field. The perceiving power of mind to shape substance is yours to use or not. Actually, we use it anyway. It's whether it's for our good or for our not so good. So let's not waste this crisis. Let's not just wait it out. There is a creative intelligence that is informing us to thrive. So rest assured that faith in invisible substance is the key to demonstrating and manifesting. And faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the convictions of things not seen. And yet we can feel them. We can bring hope to it. We can have our heart open to possibilities emerging. We can magnetize God and good for ourselves, for each other, for this planet. We need it now more than ever. Magnetize your life for the world that you plant seeds to live in. Seeds of hope, seeds of goodness. You are the light of the world, living in this one presence and this one power. So, rest assured, be kind, be loving. We are in this together. Amen.